Welcome back to the Nebraska Football Show. I'm Tim Verghese, joined as always by Steve Marik. Steve, we've got a lot to get to. We can start, with Nebraska's loss to UCLA. We didn't expect that. You and I, going into that game, didn't expect
No.
that result. Didn't expect UCLA to look the way they did. We said, that UCLA defense is probably better than some people give them credit for. The team as a whole better than people give them credit for. Ethan Garbers and that offense playing the best football prior to the bye week, and they came in and they attacked. They just kind of picked Nebraska apart in the first half offensively. Nebraska started to adjust, but it was a little too late in the second half. Weren't able to mount that comeback. Steve, we're a couple of days removed from that game and everything, and obviously now the Dana Holgorsen hire and all of that. But where's your head at right now in terms of where this program is and what they are relative to expectations for the season?
So I wrote it in my check down column, which I enjoy doing every week. Time consuming, but I like doing it. I wrote that I'm done thinking that I understand this Nebraska football team. I don't. They are unpredictable. This is a really, really unpredictable football team. And that's scary if you're a Nebraska football fan because you don't know which team is going to show up. Is it going to be the Indiana team or is it going to be the one that almost beat Ohio State? Um, yeah, so this is a season full of ups and downs, and yeah, I did not see the UCLA outcome coming at all. And so what does that mean for the rest of the season? Who the heck knows, Tim? I could see Nebraska going on the road to LA and beating Lincoln Riley's USC. I could see them laying an egg in LA. And that goes for the remaining games against Wisconsin and Iowa. It is just really hard to get a grasp on this team. And listening to Matt Rule after the games and during his Monday and Thursday press conferences, it doesn't really sound like he understands what's going on either. And that's scary as well. It just sounds like he's trying to find the right buttons to push. And, when you're in year two of this thing, it's just really uninspiring. It just really doesn't, give you a lot of hope, I guess. But, you know, a lot of the talk surrounding this program, and especially with the offense and the play caller Marcus Satterfield, is when is Matt Rule going to change something? When is he going to do something about this? When are we going to see changes on the field? Well, we saw one. We got one with the hire of Dana Holgorsen as an offensive analyst. You're bringing in an air raid guy, a very well respected offensive mind who has coached some really good offenses, who knows how to score points. He's going to take a look at Nebraska's offense and help wherever he can. So I think that's exciting in a way, and it should be exciting for Dylan Raiola too, who looks like he's going to be healthy enough to play at USC. And I just think that this in a way can provide some excitement, some momentum inside that program to get one more win, go bowling, and kind of just continue to take steps forward in kind of an unsure time right now. So, Tim, what do you think? Like, how do you break this whole thing down?
Yeah, I will say this, I mean, for a program that I just needs to put up points. Dana's about as good as you can get. A guy that has put
Oh
up
yeah,
points everywhere he's been, and at the very least, you can just hope that his influence and his addition to the staff just allows that offense to be a little more effective in these final three games. Which it felt like on Saturday and other games more effective offense is like all this team really needs. Like they are that close in terms of we talk about this team being inconsistent and week to week. Like, okay, the defense is inconsistent in the sense that some weeks against, somewhat lesser opponents and then against Ohio State and Colorado, they're world beaters. And then
yeah,
they come back down to earth a little bit. But even the games that come back down to earth, the Illinois game, the Indiana game, or the Indiana game is a bit of an exception. That was just an outlier altogether. But the Illinois game and the UCLA game, they start off slow in the first half, but then they really bounce back in that second half. They've done that consistently over the last 2 years of really just getting Nebraska into a position of having that opportunity to win. They start slow. Tony White goes into halftime, makes the necessary adjustments. They come out. They're able to limit the opponent. They do enough. The offense has been just consistently like meh all year, especially the last few games. Like they had a good start to the year. There was some exciting things early on. It's kind of stagnated the last few weeks, and I think the biggest issue with me, and again, we'll see how much this changes in the coming weeks with Dana's influence. But the concerning things for me are just like the regression from Dylan Raiola in terms of like his eyes, his feet, his ability to read through defenses. What made him so intriguing early on, where we saw top NFL draft analysts talking about him like a future first round pick, and like as a freshman being like, okay, 2027 is going to be the first QB off the board. They were saying that early in the year because what Dylan was doing was not, it wasn't the deep shots. It wasn't these like flash explosive plays. He was standing in the pocket. He was reading through progressions and he was throwing to the open guy. He wasn't scared to throw across the middle of the field. He was standing in the pocket, taking hits and throwing and throwing with decisive accuracy. We haven't seen
Layering
that guy.
balls over the second level, in front of the third level, over the outstretched hand of the
Those are the
linebacker,
NFL
in front of the
throws.
safety. Those are the NFL.
Yep.
Those are the highlights that you're going to be that you'd watch on ESPN when he gets taken in the draft. It's like those exact throws.
Yep. Those aren't the wow throws that everyone like, gets up in arms about and gets them off their feet. But those are the throws that make you an NFL quarterback and that project to the NFL. And he was making those throws early in the year. So it's definitely in there. And you go back to the high school tape, it's all definitely in there.
Oh yeah,
It's just he doesn't trust the situation around him right now. The
doesn't
line
look comfortable.
the Yep, he doesn't look comfortable. And it's on the situation around him. They've not really helped him out a whole lot. But at the same time, it goes into him as well. Like Saturday, there were throws where he would probably like back. There were moments he would probably like back where if he makes a couple of different throws, a couple of different
Yeah,
ways, we're talking about Nebraska coming on the other side of that and being 6-3 and having a bowl berth.
the last 4 games, UCLA. Sorry, Tim, I'm fighting through a cold here. It is November. UCLA, Ohio State, Indiana, Rutgers. The last 4 games, he is completing 58% of his passes for 693 yards, 1 touchdown against 6 interceptions. Obviously, the 3 interceptions at Indiana played a large role in that 6 number. So yeah, I mean, he just doesn't look comfortable out there. That's the main takeaway with this whole thing with Dylan. And Ethan Garber's looked super comfortable. UCLA just punched Nebraska in the mouth with those with Eric Bieniemy's opening script. For as long as that thing went, I mean, Garbers was just really impressive on Saturday. He was firing darts all over the seat, all over the field. Um, Mainly in the first half. Tony White's defense, I think, adjusted pretty well in the second half. Marquise Buford Jr. beat on got beat by a really talented true freshman receiver, by the way, Quasi Gilmer. I really, really like that guy out of Sierra Canyon High School, true freshman. But yeah, it's just a really interesting time in Nebraska's football program right now. And you're absolutely right, Tim. I don't think the pieces surrounding Dylan Raiola are turning out to be as good as we thought they were in the preseason, because that was the thing when Dylan flipped from Georgia. Was you kind of closed your eyes and you imagined how this thing was going to look during the season, and it's like, wow, he's got a veteran offensive line with over like 100 career starts. He has multiple capable running backs. He has this wide receiver room that's been completely transformed with the additions of Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair. Ja'Cory Barney's burst onto the scene as a true freshman from Miami. That kid is electric. He's lightning in a bottle. There's all these pieces, right? But then we get into the Big Ten play, and defensive coordinators are finding out that maybe the pieces surrounding Dylan Raiola aren't as good. And so you can light them up with pressure. And that's exactly what UCLA did. They were sending 6-man pressures routinely, especially on third down, and Nebraska couldn't do anything about it. And that's just, it's uninspiring, and it makes you wonder how the rest of these games are going to go. But I still believe that these 3 remaining games are all toss-ups. USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, these are winnable games for Nebraska. So with the addition of Dana Holgorsen, that appears to be Matt Rule's version of shaking things up offensively. Maybe that makes an impact on the offense. Maybe his ideas make a real impact. It's going to be interesting to see what it looks like on the field. Is it going to be like these drastic changes? Like we said in an earlier pod, Tim, it's going to be hard for Dana Holgorsen to fly into Lincoln on Monday, meet the guys on Tuesday, go to work on Wednesday, and implement his stuff. I don't think it's going to be that drastic, but I think that Dana Holgorsen is really going to do some good things in the film room with guys and just kind of just presenting his ideas and what he would do in certain situations. I think that's where his benefit is going to be. And then next year we'll see if Dana Holgorsen is still around and if he is, in what capacity, because that could be exciting too.
I would want to say the writing's on the wall necessarily, but it kind of feels like the
It's a
writing's.
big question right now. What's going to happen with
Yeah,
Mark Satterfield?
yeah, and but yeah, and like I said again on the Tuesday show, just a reaction to the hire as well. Like more than anything, it feels like the plays are there, but it's like the sequencing isn't, and that's where a guy like Dana can come in and really help and move things forward. I guess for you, where are you at on the offensive line play this year?
Yeah, so they've had some injuries, right? Turner Corcoran, starting left tackle, going down in the fourth game against Illinois, replaced by a redshirt freshman and Gunnar Gatula, who looks like he's got some potential. He's doing some good things out there. He's not a liability out there, so that's a good thing. Obviously, there's room to improve with him, but that will come in time. He's just a second year college football player, playing left tackle. And then the Micah Mazuka stuff at right guard, at one point he was considered the team's best run blocker, but he gets suspended for a week, and he loses his starting job to Henry Lutovsky. So, I think coming into the season, you would look at like the starting center, Ben Scott, and you would look at the right tackle, Bryce Benhart, and you would be like, man, yeah, those are two good anchors, like right in the middle and right on the edge. Like that's good. But, if you watch the games and you kind of key on those guys, I think that they would tell you that they haven't played their best football, that they haven't been as good as everyone had hoped they would be, with Ben Scott and Bryce Benhart. And then obviously combine that with the issue at left tackle, whether you want to call it an issue or not, with Gunnar Gatula and Micah
Yeah, I mean, it's
Mazuka.
just he's a third string tackle, man. He shouldn't be out. Like,
Yeah,
not that he shouldn't, but it's like he's young and
it's
he's
a
still
lot of pressure on
developing, and
him.
this is
It's
this
a lot
far
of
ahead.
pressure on him.
Yeah, this is he's further along in the timeline than he was expected to be, and so I think you give Gatula specifically some grace, but yeah, I was mainly
Yes.
getting to I, Ben Scott last year. There were times that I
Hmm.
watched him play, and I was like, oh, there's a chance this guy could be like an
I was
NFL.
writing that he was going to be drafted and like
Yeah,
one of the first like Huskers drafted, but
yeah,
I think that
because
that has
the
kind of gone
the
down.
center draft is not very great, but and whether that's because of regression of the people next to him or like not as comfortable with the people around him or what, but it's not looked that way this year. I mean, there's times where like he's the one that's letting up the pressure, or like he's the one that's
Yep.
getting mauled off the line, or he's the one that's not getting the pressure up front. Like for your veteran leader on the line, and that's not he's not done it. He's not been enough. He's not been good enough.
And I love Justin Evans. But when you're saying Justin Evans is like the most consistent starter on the offensive line right now, I think that's a problem. And that's
Yeah.
nothing against Justin Evans. I really like Justin Evans. He's a really good run blocker. But yeah, Tim, I totally agree with you. Ben Scott, Bryce Benhart has had some bad moments as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Some false
Yeah.
starts, and really poor moments, like, where you really can't have a penalty from
The guy
a
that
senior
literally
leader.
has the most, him and Ty Robinson has
Yeah,
the most career starts in program history.
exactly. You
You
can't have
that
that from that
Yeah.
guy in that moment,
No.
but
Yeah.
they're happening. So yeah, the offensive line hasn't been as good as everybody thought it was going to be. Same thing with the receivers and the running backs.
Yeah, it's a mess right now, and yeah, it's again, who knows? Again, the talent's there, the plays are there. It's just about sequencing it together. So it's like maybe Dana turns this around, and we're not talking about this 2 weeks from now. But the story of the season's been again, Nebraska has these opportunities to do. They squander opportunities, and that's like Saturday they had a recruiting opportunity, squandered. On field opportunity to make a bowl game, squandered. It's it's patterns and it's systematic that goes beyond this current coaching staff. Like, for the first time Saturday, it really felt like, oh, we're back to it. Like this is the same old program that, we've all been watching for the past couple of decades now.
And if you listen to Matt Rule, if you watch his body language, he really seems like a guy who's searching for an answer, and that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, maybe Dana Holgorsen at bringing Phil
Yeah,
Snow in as a
that's the
consultant.
change.
Yeah,
That's him doing
maybe those
something
changes
about it.
aren't. Yep,
The fan
yep. And
base
so
is
that's within.
screaming. The fan
Yeah,
base is screaming, do something about it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, he just did something and
and
in
he
a
was
big
aggressive.
way.
That's an aggressive
Oh
hire.
yeah.
Like Dana
Dana
again,
Dana
hiring Dana
Holgerson is an
away from
aggressive move.
TCU,
Yeah.
a TCU program that, by the way, could potentially open up at the end of the season. So, and if
Yeah,
Dana
should.
wanted to
Mm-hmm.
stick around and be an interim guy or something, he very well could have. But instead, he's here. He's at
Yeah.
Nebraska. So it's an aggressive move, and we'll see how it works. Yeah, but yeah, there are issues for sure, and I guess if you want to go on the defensive side of the ball too, I guess my concern, and we talked about this the last bye week too, because it's a bigger picture discussion. Overall, the talent that Rule has brought in has had an effect. Ja'Cory Barney's one of the more consistent offensive players, a
Sure.
young guy that figures to have a good career at Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Vincent
should he
Shavers
stick
has
around?
made an impact.
Vincent Shavers has made an impact. Prince Will last year.
Keona Davis
Cam Lenhart.
has played important snaps as a true freshman
Mm-hmm.
interior defensive lineman. It's
Yep.
impressive.
Dante Dowdle, it hasn't all been perfect for him, but
You could tell there's something there though. Like I
there
like
is
me some
something there. That's
Dante
a guy that,
Dowdell. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
He's
that's a
just
guy
such a
that,
young player and he's learning. And he's
yeah,
learning about the Big Ten and how to run in the Big Ten and I think the offense is learning about how to use Dante Dowdell
yeah,
in correct
much.
ways.
Very much so. And you look at the on the def on with him specific with Dante too. Like that's a guy that in high school was primarily running out of the I formation, was running out of
Yes.
these looks where he always has a blocker in front of him, a lead blocker. He's still getting used to, kind of playing out of the gun, playing, out of these different formations and having to run and create his own angles and things like that. So I still believe there's upside with Dante Dowdle. I think he's a guy that has the potential to be a bell cow back in the future. But yeah, elsewhere on the defense, it's like some of these young guys they brought in: Cam Leonard, Prince Will at linebacker, Vincent Shavers, like you mentioned, Amari Sanders at DB. And again, the development of Tommy Hill, like getting him to play this, there are positives of like what this defense has done in developing guys, but there's also this like, hey, you've brought in a bunch of your people and they're not playing. And whether that's a we're building for the future, like Rule said, all redshirts are off the next 3 games. That's a bit of a feels like a desperation move, but also the way I read it is there are talented people, Riley Van Poppel, except there are talented members of this team that aren't playing right now because they're being preserved for the future. Which, when you're building the program the way Matt Rule wants to build it, I understand it. But at the same time, you're there are expectations and you have to play the best players. And it seems like they're going to be doing that moving forward. But right now there's a lot of going into next year. We're talking about a lot of these defensive bodies that are being replaced. And we're like, yeah, well, hypothetically, they have the bodies to do it, but we just haven't seen the development. And maybe that's lack of reps, maybe that's lack of whatever. But I've not seen the development consistently across the board.
Do you think with some of the and this can be a quick discussion with 9 minutes left, but do you think the defensive backfield with the safeties and the rover? So like what I'm asking is, do you think it would really be better if you take Isaac Gifford off the field, Deshaun Singleton off the field, and Marquise Buford off the field, and like Malcolm Hartzog? I know he didn't play against UCLA with the hamstring, but do you think that the guys behind them would do a better job than those guys right now?
So
That's
where I'm
to
at,
me. To
yeah.
me, when I'm looking at it, I would say no because there's those starters right now are bigger, faster, stronger. They are veteran college football players who have played in the Big Ten for 4 to 5 years, and those guys behind them are either first or second year guys who don't have that experience. And I think the game would be a little bit fast for them.
Yeah, and that's my thing. I think they're decisive players that are out there because they're veterans. I will say this. I think
Yeah.
Nebraska has an athlete problem in the back end of the secondary. I think some of the guys behind them, the Jeremiah Charles, the Caleb Bennings, the Braylon Prudes, those are better athletes than some of the guys that are out there. Those guys are just young and still figuring it out and aren't ready. Amari Sanders. I think Amari Sanders is a better athlete than some of the other DBs that are out there. Like
Mm-hmm.
they've got good, like elite. Like that's the thing. That's the one thing about Matt Rule is he's going to bring elite athletes in the program. And there are elite
Mm-hmm.
athletes in depth spots. but are
Mhm.
they developed enough to contribute?
And
Maybe
we
not
saw
this
that.
year.
Yeah, we saw Jeremiah Charles make his
Mhm.
first career start at corner. It didn't go
It did
really
not go
well.
well.
He was out. He was out of the game 8 plays in because UCLA was picking on him, and rightly so, because he was making his first career start, and he's still a raw football player. He only played one season of high school football. He redshirted last year after 4 games, and now he goes. He makes his first career start, and it just didn't go well. But again, when I look at Ethan Garbers making that 57-yard scramble on a 3rd and 9 in the second quarter, I believe, and Isaac Gifford can't catch up to him, that's where I'm just like, man,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I don't know if that should be happening, right now, year
Right.
2 at Nebraska for what this defense is wanting to do. I love Isaac Gifford. He is a heartbeat of that team. He is a heartbeat of the program. He cares so much, and I respect that. But he it's just watching him trail Ethan Garbers on that scramble. It's like you're absolutely right, Tim. I think the
Yeah.
defensive backfield is lacking athleticism and speed and all of that.
Yeah, and I had this discussion actually with Luke Gifford, Isaac's older brother, of Nebraska is asking the rover position to do something a little different this year
No, that's a
because
tough position. I
it's
feel like that's got to be so hard to play.
and that's the thing. It's a very difficult position, but what he was doing last year is a lot different than what he's doing this year. He was better positioned for what they were doing last year with that position than what they're doing now. And so that long term, again, it's a long term building out of this defense and a long term building out of this program, but it is affecting them in this very moment because they don't necessarily have the athletes and they don't necessarily have guys in the best position for success. It might
Mhm.
work out in the long term, like next year, Ramir Stewart and Braden Prude step into that rower position. Both of
Mhm.
those guys probably better suited for what they're looking for at that position right now. Isaac
Mhm.
Gifford is more of an overhang linebacker, was excellent last year and as like that basically that third linebacker that could creep into the
Yep.
box. They're having
Yep.
him play basically cover three deep safety now. That's
And
not
that's
what
not
he
his
should be
strength.
doing. That's not his strength. And so,
Mhm.
and I get why they do it. I understand,
Sure.
you want a veteran back there to be able to call things out and do all of that.
Mhm.
But where you're seeing it get exposed is in these one-on-one situations where you've got a good athlete out in space. It's tough.
Deshaun Singleton too. I
Yep.
mean, I love Deshaun Singleton. What he is really good at is being a downhill safety, filling
Coming
gaps,
downhill.
making take. Yes, absolutely. But what if, unfortunately, he's been caught in some bad situations where it's him and another guy and a whole lot of space, and he whiffs. He did it against Indiana. He did it against Ethan Garbers on that run that I talked about. So it's just there. I don't know. Sometimes it's really hard to say this stuff because I love Deshaun, I love Isaac Gifford, but at the end of the day, they're not making the plays. And that rule, when we talk to him, like what needs to change, guys need to make more plays, and they aren't
Mhm.
being made right now.
Yeah. And it's tough because I do think the front, they're not getting at home consistently, but there should
Yeah, that
expectations
too.
shouldn't be on them to get home as
Hmm.
much as they're being asked to right now because the back end can cover downfield for as long as they need to. Like, yeah, I think a lot of the issues with the defense right now point back to the secondary because I do think the front is doing enough and over the course of the season, game to game, like I don't think
Hmm.
they did enough against UCLA up front. But
Yeah, and
um
UCLA was second in the Big Ten in sacks allowed with 20.
yeah.
And then I mean they sacked Ethan Garbers twice, but in my opinion, I don't think they really impacted Ethan Garbers. Ethan
Yeah.
Ethan Garbers was comfortable as heck all game.
Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, I think the secondary has to improve a little bit, and again maybe a full off season of John Butler and Tony White working together, because they did have make that change at a very last minute, and Butler has a very different idea for what he wants the DBs to do than um, Evan Cooper did. Who Evan Cooper was kind of just within the defense rather than having his guys do his own things. Um, Maybe
So
it works out. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not as
Tim,
worried about the offense as I am the defense. I mean, I'm not as worried about the defense as I am the
no,
offense.
no. Oh no.
Yeah.
My worry level is way, way down here with
Yeah.
the
Because
defense
again,
compared to
like I
where the
think the
offense is.
defensive conversation is interesting because it's all still relative to expectations. Because like again, the problem is like people around here start to freak out when they're not playing like world beating level defense. In this
Mm,
conference, you can't play like you're not going to be this team. Nebraska's not going to be this team that is playing like top 10 in the country level defense consistently. They just don't have the athletes out there to do that. You have to have an elite level of athleticism out there to do that. Nebraska doesn't have that there right now. They can get there. They can definitely get there. but the expectations on them are to be a top 10 unit every week to try and
Hmm.
win. And that's just not like, that's not fair to them
It's not
because even
realistic. It's not
the
fair.
the worst
Yeah.
games they play out again, Indiana is what it is. It happened. It's in the past. But outside of that one outlier game, the worst games they play, they are adjusting in the second half. They are doing
Yeah.
the little things right, and they're still playing like a top 25 to top 30 unit.
Hmm.
They're just not playing like a top 10 unit, which everyone wants them to be because the offense can't score more than 18 points.
Yeah. For Nebraska to win football games, yeah, the defense, there's so much pressure. If you give up more than 2 touchdowns, that might be it. And that might mean a Nebraska loss. And that sucks for those guys. Tim, before we get out of here, USC making a change at quarterback. No more Miller Moss. It is being reported that Jaden Maeva is going to be starting for the USC Trojans. 6'4", 220 pounds, a redshirt sophomore, third-year guy out of Hawaii. Really talented guy.
That'll
You,
fix
you
it. That'll fix the offensive struggle. No, I'm kidding. I'm
what do
kidding.
you think about Jaden? What do you think about Lakin Riley making a move at quarterback? Jaden Maeva, for those who don't know, he was the Mountain West Conference Freshman of the Year 2 seasons ago. Then he hit the portal, almost landed at Georgia. He actually committed to Georgia out of the transfer portal, but then flipped to the USC. Dual threat guy. What do you think about that? And what does that mean for Nebraska's defense?
Yeah, they're gonna have to adjust for a dual threat guy, like a true dual
Yeah,
threat guy, and it kind of fits better for what Lincoln wants out of his offense. But the offensive issues with uh USC
they go
right now
deeper.
are beyond quarterback. It's they have the personnel out there. Zachariah Branch hasn't played up to the standard that he would probably want, and hasn't been as good as people want. They don't run the ball enough. They have good running backs and Woody Marks and Joyner. But two guys that are pretty electric and can carry the load. I don't think they're running the ball enough. I think it's more of like but we'll see. Again, maybe Lincoln is more comfortable with a dual threat guy, can kind of go back into his like Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts type bag in terms of play calling and deciding and just open up an old playbook. But yeah, a change, something Nebraska's gonna have to be prepared for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you were just kind of breaking down USC's offensive woes. If I like just didn't hear you say USC, I thought you'd be talking about Nebraska. So these are two offenses. These are two offenses that are trying to figure stuff out right now. So
Yep.
that makes that game super super intriguing.
Yep, we'll have that preview up next week, but that'll do it for us here. Be sure to tune into our coverage from the hire yesterday, and like and subscribe this video, and we'll be back next week with a USC preview.